Zero. That is where this starts. Not because it is dramatic, because it is true. Most people watching this have been at zero. Some are still there right now. Zero is not just a number. Zero is a feeling. A specific kind of Tuesday. It is the grocery store calculation in your head before you reach the register. It is sleeping a certain way. Not fully, not quietly. Because your account balance puts something in the back of your mind. This video goes from $0 to $500,000. Every level. What changes at each one? Not the theory. The actual felt experience of having that number sitting in your account. What you do differently. How you think differently. What other people do differently around you. We're going to take this slowly. Because the point is not just to say the number. The point is to show you what happens at each level, so you can see where you are right now. At zero, money is not abstract. It is immediate. Every decision connects directly to survival. Rent due in 11 days. Groceries for the week. Gas to get to work. The math is relentless. What most people do not realize about zero is that it costs more than any other level. The overdraft fee is $35. The late fee is $29. The payday loan is 391% APR. At zero, one unexpected $400 expense is a crisis. 1 in 3 Americans cannot cover it without borrowing. The mental load at zero is heavy. Every financial decision carries weight. You calculate, you wait, you sometimes go without. And this constant calculation, this never-ending triage, is exhausting in a way that makes everything else harder. Sleep, focus, patience, relationships. Everything runs on a harder setting when the account reads zero. But zero is also where something important is decided. Quietly, without ceremony, usually without the person even realizing it. The people who move past zero fastest are not always the ones who earn the most. They are the ones who decide first. Something shifts at $500. You stop checking your balance before every purchase. Not because you are rich, because the answer is no longer zero. That gap is one of the most underrated financial transitions a person can make. At $1,000, you can absorb the car repair. You can handle the unexpected doctor's visit. You are not free, but you are no longer one bad Tuesday away from a complete spiral. This is where the emergency fund conversation starts. Advisors say 3 to 6 months of expenses. The real target at this stage is simpler. 1 month. For most Americans in 2026, that is between $2,800 and $3,400. That single number, 1 month fully funded, changes how you move through your days. Not dramatically, quietly. But the change is permanent once you feel it. At $2,000, you start making slightly longer decisions. Not just this week, this month, maybe next month. You begin to see past the immediate and into something that resembles a plan. At $5,000, breathing room becomes real. You stop taking every overtime shift out of fear. You start taking some of them out of choice. That distinction, fear versus choice, is one of the quietest but most important transitions in financial life. It changes your posture at work. It changes what you are willing to say out loud. It changes who has leverage in your relationships. $5,000 does that. Not because it is a large amount, but because it is yours. Here is what $5,000 does not do. It does not protect you from a major medical bill or a job loss longer than 6 weeks. But it gives you enough runway to think clearly. And thinking clearly without panic is worth more than most people calculate. $10,000. This is the number that changes something psychological. Not just financial. Psychological. Something in how you see yourself and what you believe is actually possible for you. At $10,000, you have options that did not exist before. You can walk away from a bad job without immediately catastrophizing. You can negotiate a salary because you are not desperate. You can turn down a client who treats you badly. You can wait for a better apartment instead of taking the first available one. You can say no to things that cost you more than money. $10,000 is not freedom, but it is the first real taste of what freedom feels like. The people who reach $10,000 and spend it, who treat it like a reward after years of struggling, often find themselves back at 2,000 within 8 months. Not because they are irresponsible, because nobody explained what 10,000 is actually for. It is not a reward. It is a tool, a buffer, a foundation. The moment you spend it like a reward, the tool is gone, and you are back at the beginning, rebuilding from scratch. Between 15,000 and 20,000, something new enters your financial life. Actual strategy. You are no longer in triage mode. You can think about where money goes instead of just whether there is any left. At this level, the Roth IRA conversation becomes real. The index fund conversation becomes real. The difference between a 4.5% high-yield savings account and a 0.01% checking account becomes a number worth calculating. At 20,000, sitting in a standard savings account at 0.01%, you earn $2 per year. At 20,000 in a 4.5% HYSA, you earn $900. That is $898 per year sitting there uncollected. This is also the level where lifestyle inflation starts its first real attack. You feel stable. You feel like you can finally afford things. The car upgrade whispers start. The apartment whispers start. Some are reasonable. Some will undo everything. The people who make it past 20,000 learn to hear the difference between a reasonable upgrade and one that quietly resets 3 years of progress. That skill, distinguishing those two whispers, is worth learning now. $25,000 is where two types of people become visible for the first time. Same income, same starting point in many cases, completely different financial architecture underneath, and completely different destinations ahead. Type 1, 25,000 saved, a $740 car payment, $1,650 in rent, a credit card at 22% APR, and a savings rate of essentially zero. They have the number, but it is not moving. It may be shrinking. Type 2, 25,000 saved, a paid-off used car, $1,400 in rent, no credit card balance, and $600 going automatically into a Roth IRA every month. Same income in many cases, different system underneath. The difference between these two people is not discipline or willpower, it is structure. Type 1 is managing money. Type 2 has designed a system where money moves to the right places automatically, before it can be spent. At $30,000, you feel it in your body. Not arrogance. Steadiness. The kind of steadiness that lets you sleep without the 3 a.m. calculation running quietly in your head all night. The kind of steadiness that lets you sit across a negotiating table without your hands sweating. Because you know that whatever happens in that room, you are not cornered. $30,000 does that to a conversation. At 50,000 saved, the math starts working for you instead of against you. At 4.5% in a high-yield savings account, $50,000 generates $2,250 per year, completely passively, every year. That is $187 every single month showing up because the money exists. This is the first time most people feel what passive income actually means. Not someone selling it to you, but a real number arriving in your account. Take Douglas, 41 years old, warehouse supervisor. $61,000 a year. He hit $50,000 in savings on a Thursday in February. He did not tell anyone. He went home and made a grilled cheese sandwich. But something had changed, and he felt it 3 weeks later when his manager said something dismissive in a meeting. Douglas did not flinch. He nodded and moved on. Because somewhere in his mind, he knew the exit was funded. Between $50,000 and $75,000 is where the decision about what to do with money becomes genuinely important. Up until now, the answer was simple. Save it, protect it. Now the answer gets complicated, and getting it wrong costs years. The common mistake at $75,000 is keeping all of it in savings. At 4.5%, $75,000 earns $3,375 per year. That sounds reasonable. Until you see the alternative. $75,000 in a broad index fund at historical 10.5% annual returns grows by $7,875 in year one. The difference is $4,500 per year. and compounded over 20 years, that gap becomes $312,000. Not from working harder, not from earning more, from making one decision about where the money lives. That is what this level costs when the decision is made wrong. $300,000 over time. The correct structure. Keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in a high-yield account. Liquid, safe, accessible for emergencies. Everything above that threshold goes to work in the market. Sitting still above your emergency fund is an expensive choice disguised as safety. 6 figures. $100,000. The comma arrives. And with it, a specific kind of quiet that people who have never been there do not fully understand until they are standing in it. At $100,000, the math becomes undeniable. At 10.5% historical S&P 500 returns, $100,000 becomes $271,000 in 10 years, without adding a single additional dollar to the account, without overtime, without a side hustle, without doing anything except leaving it alone and not touching it. The money grows by $171,000 from one decision made once on one unremarkable day. This is also the level where other people begin behaving differently around you, even when they do not know the number. There is something in the posture of a person with $100,000 saved. People sense it without being able to name it. Now meet Vivian, 37 years old, elementary school art teacher, annual salary $54,000. Nobody at her school knew the number in her account. She drove a 2017 Civic. She brought lunch every day in a blue insulated bag. She maxed her Roth IRA every January, specifically January 3rd, the first business day of the year. By 37, she had $103,000 saved and invested. Her colleagues assumed she was stretching like everyone else. She was not. She had been quietly running a system for 9 years, and the system had been running the math while she slept, while she taught, while she graded papers at her kitchen table on Sunday evenings. $100,000 on a teacher's salary, built by a system. Here is what changes at $150,000 that most people do not expect. The fear does not disappear. It transforms. Up until now, fear was about scarcity. Do I have enough? Will it run out? What if something happens? At $150,000, the fear shifts to a different question. Am I doing enough with what I have? Is it growing correctly? Am I making a mistake I cannot see? This is a better class of fear, but it still freezes people. Some people overprotect the money at this level. They keep it too safe. They watch it underperform for years because the anxiety of loss has not caught up with the new reality, which is that at this level, the risk of not growing is larger than the risk of losing. Inflation at 3% erodes $150,000 by $4,500 in real purchasing power every single year. A fully cash account loses ground every year it sits still. The correct response to having this amount is not caution, it is deliberate strategy. $200,000 is where life begins to look structurally different. Not just the account balance, the actual structure of your available choices. Things you could not do at $100,000 are now within reach. You can make a down payment on a home in most markets without wiping out your savings. You can leave a job without taking the next one out of desperation. You can fund the first 2 years of a child's college. The options are real, and they are yours. This is also where the wealth conversation in America gets interesting. $200,000 saved puts you in the top 20% of American savers by balance. Not income. Balance. Most people earning 6 figures have less than $50,000 saved. The person with $200,000 and a $55,000 income has built something genuinely rare in this country. Not by earning more than everyone else, by keeping more of what they already earned. That distinction matters more than most people realize. At $200,000 invested at 10.5% annually, the account grows by $21,000 in the first year alone, more than the full annual income of the average minimum wage worker, generated by a balance sitting in an account, not by labor, halfway to $500,000. And here is what most people do not realize. The second half is significantly faster than the first. The compounding has been building for years. The engine is now much larger than it was when you started. The first 250,000 took Douglas 11 years. The second 250,000, at historical returns with continued contributions, took him 6 years. Not because his income jumped dramatically, because compounding had become the primary engine of growth. This is the law of compounding at its most visible. The first 100,000 is the hardest. It comes slowly, requires discipline when the number is not yet impressive. But once the balance is large enough, the math takes over and does the heavy lifting. And the math is relentless. It is consistent. It is completely indifferent to whether you feel motivated this month, whether the news cycle is frightening, whether you are tired of watching the balance. The math compounds regardless, every single day. Between 300,000 and 400,000, something unusual happens in American social life. You become financially invisible. You do not look wealthy. You are not driving a car that signals wealth. You are simply a person with a number nobody can see. This invisibility is not accidental. It is a choice. The people who reach 300,000 quietly have almost always made this choice explicitly. I will not look like the number. Because the people who spend money looking wealthy are the ones who cannot build it. The people who build it have, at some point, decided that the audience for their net worth is not their neighbors, or their coworkers, or their social media followers. The audience is their future self, the one who will need the money to actually be there. At 350,000 in the market, the annual growth at historical rates is $36,750 per year. From nothing but the balance existing. From the market doing what it has consistently done for over 100 years. That $36,750 is more than the full annual salary of 28% of American workers, produced entirely by an account balance. Not by showing up anywhere, not by trading hours, just by the number being there and time passing. At 400,000, retirement becomes a real conversation, not a concept for some distant future version of yourself. At the standard 4% safe withdrawal rate, 400,000 generates $16,000 per year without touching the principal at all. That is not enough to retire on alone for most people in 2026. But it is real supplemental income, real money, produced by money, arriving every year while the principal stays intact and continues to grow. Vivian hit 400,000 at age 44. She did not retire. She changed how she thought about her job. She went from needing the salary to choosing it. And that shift, from need to choice, changed everything. She became calmer in difficult meetings, more creative in how she approached her classroom, less reactive when administration made decisions she disagreed with, better at everything, not because the job changed, but because the financial pressure had been quietly removed from underneath it all. $500,000. The destination this video began with. And the math here is worth sitting with for a moment before we close, because most people have never actually seen it laid out completely. At 10.5% annual historical return, 500,000 grows by $52,500 in a single year. That is $4,375 per month, generated entirely by the balance, while you sleep, while you work, while you live your life. More than the median American monthly take-home pay. Produced by a number. Silently. Without a single hour of labor. Without a commute. Without a meeting. Without a manager. Just compounding, running in the background every day without asking for anything. At the 4% safe withdrawal rate, 500,000 provides $20,000 per year in perpetuity. The principal intact, the account continuing to grow to replace what you withdraw, so the balance does not shrink as you use it. Add the average Social Security benefit in 2026, $1,847 per month. And 500,000 creates a combined retirement income of $42,164 per year. Not lavish, but funded and real. Here is the math nobody shows you at the beginning, when the number feels impossibly far away. A 28-year-old contributing $600 per month to a broad index fund reaches $500,000 by age 53. Not because they got lucky, not because they earned a large income, because they started. They stayed consistent for 25 years. And they let compounding do what compounding does when you give it enough time and do not interrupt it. Douglas made that decision at 29. He opened his first brokerage account with $847. He felt slightly embarrassed by how small it was. He transferred it anyway. He set up the automatic monthly contribution. He did not look at it for 3 months. Vivian made her decision at 28. She set up an automatic transfer of $583 every month, the exact amount that maxed her Roth IRA divided by 12. And she promised herself she would pretend the money did not exist. 2 people, 2 decisions, made quietly on unremarkable days with no audience and no fanfare. And over the next 20 years, those 2 decisions produced numbers that changed the structural shape of their entire lives. Every option, every choice, every morning. The number in your account right now is not your destiny. It is your starting point. Every level we walked through tonight was reached by someone who started somewhere lower. Someone who had less than you might have right now. Someone who had the Tuesday feeling. Someone who did the grocery store calculation in their head. Someone who at some point was sitting exactly where you are right now, with a number that felt too small to matter and a future that felt too far away to plan. The only question is what you do with the next 12 months, because in 12 months the number will be different, in one direction or the other. And that direction, more than luck, more than income, more than any single circumstance, is almost entirely up to you.